Guys, welcome back to the top 8 here at the San Bruno Premier Challenge. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We had some difficulties with the pairings, but now we are back in here in the top 8. We got Kermit the Frog, Daniel C. up on top versus David S. on bottom. And both these players are very good. I mean, they top cut a tournament that's pretty stacked. In the top cut right now, of course, we have Alex Agloza, Omari, Bad Intent, Rasta Charmander is also there, and other people. Gengar Boy is the undefeated. As we get ready to get started here, on bottom off screen, you're going to be seeing David S. with Slowbro, Sableye, Mawile, Machamp, Zapdos, and another Pokemon which I currently cannot see. As you can see, Kermit on top with his own 6, and they are ready to get underway. So right now, both players finished 4-1, and getting ready to get underway as Kermit gonna send out his Hydreigon and Mawile, as David gonna send out his Machamp and Zapdos. Machamp not really a popular Pokemon, although there are a lot of things that Machamp can do. I mean, Dynamic Punch is always strong. It made top 8 at Worlds. So, gonna get ready to get underway. Hydreigon, of course, very popular dragon right now. And Mawile, of course, you know, gonna be able to do a good amount of damage to that Machamp if it really decided to. Firing off Intimidate onto Machamp. Gonna kind of weaken it, bring it down to -1 as Mawile gonna Mega Evolve right away. As gonna go straight for a Dynamic Punch, outpacing that Hydreigon, so probably a Choice Scarf Machamp, as it's gonna confuse the Hydreigon after doing a massive amount of damage to it. And Hydreigon gonna be able to fire off the Draco Meteor through the confusion, gonna hit that Zapdos for a good amount of damage, depending on what item that Hydreigon carries. And that is actually gonna be able to pick up the knockout on Zapdos, so massive amounts of damage as Daniel gonna pick up a very early 4-3 lead, as the player gonna land from that Maul onto that Machamp, gonna do a massive amount of damage, and actually just straight up pick up the knockout as well. So that Intimidate definitely paid off for Daniel, gonna have his Hydreigon survive and pick up the early 4-2 lead after some quick knockouts. So gonna go right now into his last two. Very, very fast game right now, as Maul gonna come out for David, and so is Tyranitar. Gonna be able to do a fire off and Intimidate onto that Mawile, so that's going to be very big, as Hydreigon's most likely going to be able to be knocked out by a Sucker Punch from Mawile from that range, and of course, you know, it has to get through the confusion. So important right there, as Tyranitar, his set is a bit less predictable. Tyranitar this year going to have a very, I mean, it could be special, it could be mixed, it could be physical, so going to be interesting to see what David decided to bring into his Tyranitar set, as Kermit going to be content with restoring his Mawile, going to try to get back neutral and switch in safely, as Chandelure going to come in. Mawile going to Mega Evolve this turn. No point in staying there. Un-Mega Evolve, going to get a big stat boost and get that huge power, of course. And snaps out of confusion. Hydreigon going to be able to fire off a Draco Meteor at -2, going to be able to do a good amount of damage to Tyranitar still. But of course, that sand boosted special defense going to, wow, that did barely any damage at all from -2 and the sand boost. So going to fire off a Rock Slide right now. That Chandelure not going to enjoy taking that Rock Slide at all. Bring it all the way down to the yellow and picks up the knockout on that Hydreigon. So David fighting back right now, trying to get as much as he can. And Mawile going to fire off a Rock Slide of its own and pick up the knockout on Chandelure. So right now back down to 4-2, or 2-2 both sides, as Wash Rodent going to come out and Mawile going to come out back for Daniel. So 2-2, pretty even matchup right now. Tyranitar not enjoying facing off against Mawile or that Wash Rodent, as Mawile most likely going to be burned by that Wash Rodent. Mawile going to protect itself this turn, going to prevent anything from happening to it, and the Willows goes and into the protect. Tyranitar going to fire off the Fire Blast, going to hit that Mawile, trying to do as much damage as it can, and brings it all the way down to about 30%, as Mawile going to be able to fire off an Iron Head onto that Tyranitar and pick up the knockout. So right now it is going to be David's Mawile versus the rest of the team. Right now, Daniel in very good position right now to seal the deal. Mala, of course, going to be able to do a good amount of damage. Washroom going to fire off that Willow is going to take no chances, going to weaken that Mala as much as possible to ensure his victory, as the Ironhead going to land onto the Mawile, going to do a good amount of damage, bringing it all the way down into the red, as the play rough going to come out from Mawile. Burn does about 50%, proccing its Citrus Berry. So, good information revealed for David to try to come back in this best of 3 here in the top 8.
I could have. I have that too.
As both players right now get ready to move on this last turn, most likely, as that burn damage is going to knock out regardless of what happens. And Mawile going to protect itself, double protect. No point in revealing any other moves, really, as David is going to drop the first game. So good information to draw from both players. That Machamp revealing its Choice Scarf earlier on in the round, gonna be important information for David to see, or sorry, for Daniel to see how he can get around that. Of course, that Intimidate paid off so well because it prevented the knockout. And David, knowing now that that Dynamic Punch through the Intimidate will not be able to pick up the knockout, so David's gonna have to play around that as well. Again, this is the top 8 here at the first San Bruno Premier Challenge. We actually have a second Premier Challenge planned for you guys right after this. So back-to-back Premier Challenges up here. So back to team preview. A lot of information to be used from both sides. David on bottom with Slowbro, Tyranitar, Machamp, Sableye, Mawile, and Zapdos. Daniel on top with Mienshao, Rotom Wash, Chandelure, Hydreigon, Mawile, and Venusaur. So I don't think Daniel needs to make too many adjustments, but at the same time, David knows so much information about Kermit's team. Gonna have to try to play around as much as he can. Both players now getting ready to go and get started. As Daniel pretty content with sending out the same leads, Hydreigon, Mawile, versus David's Mawile and Sableye. So firing off Intimidates onto both Mawile, is going to be pretty important. Sableye is going to be able to play a pretty good support role. Of course, Sableye, well known for his prankster ability, going to be able to fire off Will-O-Wisp, Swaggers, all sorts of different supporting type moves. As we see what's going to happen right now, Hydreigon, of course, did a massive amount of damage to that Zapdos, so I would expect it to be Choice Specs. As we get underway right now, that Mawile gonna Mega Evolve from Daniel's side, as David's Mawile gonna Mega Evolve as well. So right now that Mawile gonna be able to heavily threaten that Hydreigon, as the other Mawile is also gonna be able to heavily threaten that Sableye. So both Mawiles right now having a very strong offensive presence against both these teams. As the Swagger comes out onto the Hydreigon, going to confuse it and see if it can move, but no, the Swagger actually prevents it from moving, hitting itself in confusion. As Mawile from Daniel's side going to be content with firing off Play Rough onto the Sableye Super Effective, going to be able to pick up a quick knockout. And I wouldn't expect to see the same from that Mawile from David's side onto the Hydreigon, and yes, that is actually going to pick up the knockout. So trading first turn hits, a critical hit, just gravy on top, really. As right now, both Mawiles still out on the field, undamaged, and it goes down to 3-on-3. Daniel going to send out Wash Rotom, and David going to be content with sending out that Zapdos. So a bit better position for David right now. That Zapdos, we didn't get to see much of what it could do last game because it was easily knocked out by the Hydreigon, but now that Hydreigon's been removed from the field. Both players right now trying to see what their best course of action is. Of course, Zapdos and Rotom are pretty much similar in what they do. Pokemon that are immune to ground-type moves, firing off powerful electric attacks, bulky fire-off support moves as well. As Zapdos going to fire off Thunderbolt, gets a paralysis on that opposing Mawile, and bringing it all the way down to the red as Rotom Wash going to fire off a Hydro Pump, but it actually misses, and Mawile's fully paralyzed, cannot move this turn, as the Iron Head lands on the opposing Mawile on Daniel's side. And David picks up a quick 3-2 lead after simply 2 turns. interesting thing to see him decide to double target that Mawile. Of course, you know, losing a Mega Pokemon in battle is kind of devastating because you only have one of that. And the mass amount of damage from Zapdos, so powerful. So powerful, as Mawile going to protect itself this turn. Chandelure going to fire off an Overheat into the Protect, as Zapdos content with firing off another Thunderbolt, going to hit that Chandelure and do massive amounts of damage and bring it all the way down to very low health, as Rotom still unable to fire off a Hydro Pump onto the Zapdos, missing it twice, and Daniel at that point just going to forfeit. Does not want to reveal too much more information, as David actually had a very, very strong advantage, and that brings David up to 1-1 as we go on to Game 3.
Dark side, each player destroys 2 cards unless he reveals a villain. Blue Beetle.
So right now, both players going to go back into Team Preview and see what they can do to adjust. Of course, great adjustments right there by David. That Zapdos, you know, proving so important to David's offensive capabilities, and removing that Hydreigon threat first turn from David, you know, shows exactly how great of a move that was. You know, that Hydreigon easily knocked out Zapdos in the first game. You know, this next game I'm going to knock out that Hydreigon so that Zapdos can have free reign over the field. Back to Team Preview right now. Of course, off screen, David S with Slowbro, Tyranitar, Sableye, Machamp, Mawile, and Zapdos. While Daniel on top, as you can see on the stream, is going to be Mienshao, Wash Rotom, Mawile, Hydreigon, Venusaur, and Chandelure. Daniel going to change it up, going to go with Wash Rotom and Mawile, going to be able to fire off Intimidates. And incoming for David's side, going to be Sableye and that Tyranitar. We saw how important that Sableye was playing that support role last game, threatening that Mawile, of course, with a Will-O-Wisp if it really wanted to, or even be able to fire off Swaggers onto the Wash Rotom. Tyranitar going to come out early, of course, not going to enjoy facing off against that Mawile, and does get intimidated by the Mawile, but at the same time we've seen Fire Blast and Rock Slide from it, so it's a mix. Tyranitar doesn't mind that Intimidate too much, of course, can still fire off Fire Blast onto that Mawile. Mawile not going to Mega Evolve this turn, going to keep that Intimidate if he decides to switch out and protect itself this turn instead. Will is landing onto the Protect from Mawile, as the Hydro Pump from Washroom going to hit that Tyranitar, going to do a good amount of damage, not even 50%, as Snarl going to come out from Tyranitar, going to lower the special attack of Wash Rotom. So interesting moveset right there by David. Really interesting move, I'd say. Good support role. Of course, you know, now that Rotom with that first Hydro Pump didn't do too much damage, now it's going to just be even less powerful, as Tyranitar going to switch out this turn. Going to go into Mawile, fire off and Intimidate. So going to try to heavily weaken that Mawile on Daniel's side. You know, firing off a Will-O-Wisp onto that Mawile, and firing off Intimidate, that's going to be heavily reduced in attack. So Mawile right now on Daniel's side, going to Mega Evolve, not going to keep that Intimidate ability anymore, and go for that huge power instead, as the Will-O-Wisp comes out and burns that Mega Mawile, and Washroom going to fire off a Hydro Pump onto that Mawile, not Mega Evolve, going to do a good amount of damage. Actually picks up a knockout with the critical hit, so instantly David losing his Mega option, really, as Iron Head from Mawile going to land on that Sableye. With that burn, not going to do too much damage. So devastating loss for David, losing his Mawile so fast due to that critical hit. Unfortunate, but at the same time, you know, the battle's still not over. David still has two more Pokemon in back, and you know, a lot of options. And in comes that Zapdos, who did so much damage beforehand. And of course, you know, last game that Wash Rotom's Hydro Pumps could not find David's Zapdos at all. So maybe that Hydro Pump might miss again and be able to have David take back the strong lead. Sableye right now going to fire off Swagger onto the Wash Rotom, going to try to prevent it from moving with Confusion. Attack going to rise sharply. Remember that Rotom is actually at -1, so that crit was very important, as the Thunderbolt going to come out from Zapdos and pick up the knockout on the Mawile. So little equalizer right there from that Zapdos. Massive amounts of damage. Let's see if Rotom can actually move this turn. And it doesn't, so it is actually confused and hits itself in confusion, doing a bit of damage. Rotom Wash right now back down to 60%, as Sandstorm damage going to chip away at all Pokemon on the field. Right now, tough decision for Daniel to see who he decides to send in, as Hydreigon's going to come in. So we see right now that Hydreigon's going to be able to pick up a knockout on either Pokemon, really. Sableye, not exactly the bulkiest, although it can have some bulk options in it. So we're going to have to see what happens. Zapdos not going to want to face off against that Hydreigon again. Smart move right there to switch out that Zapdos to try to reserve it and try to see if he can get around knocking out that Hydreigon first. With Snarl, that's going to be a good option against that Hydreigon as well. Wash Rotom going to switch out right now. Going to go straight into the Chandelure. Unfortunate right there, as the Swagger going to land on that Hydreigon, so we're going to see if that Hydreigon can move. Of course, Chandelure not really enjoying facing off against Tyranitar at all. And Hydreigon going through the confusion check. Is it going to be able to move? No, it is not able to move, and hits itself in confusion. Going to do a little bit of damage to it, as Sandstorm going to do damage back to all Pokemon on the field as well, except that Sableye. So I believe that is actually a Safety Goggles Sableye. Interesting item choice. That Swagger will be able to go through Rage Powers from Amoonguss if it is actually Safety Goggles. Hydreigon not going to risk going through confusion checks again. Going to switch out this turn into the Wash Rotom. And Sableye going to be content with just firing off more Swaggers into the Chandelure. And right now Sableye is in Swagger mode. 3 special attackers on Daniel's side, so Sableye going to be such an important role to prevent these special attackers from being able to move, as the Overheat going to be able to fire off onto the Sableye but misses. So that's an unfortunate miss right there for Daniel, as the Snarl comes out, going to lower the special attack on Chandelure and Wash Rotom. Citrus Berry going to activate, and right now David kind of in good position at -1 Chandelure and -1 Wash Rotom. He can continue to keep snarling, really, to continue to lower the special attack and not do too much damage, as Swagger right now going to come out and hit the Wash Rotom and confuse it. So right now a lot of the luck is going to be against Daniel, as confusion checks are going to be happening every turn, as the Overheat does come out and actually misses again. So unfortunate miss right there for Daniel again. That Sableye just dodging everything, and Rotom Wash going to hit itself in confusion, as the Rock Slide is going to come out, pick up the knockout on that Chandelure, and do a good amount of damage to that Wash Rotom. So right now, it is going to be Hydreigon and Wash Rotom versus Sableye and Tyranitar. And, of course, Sableye can still fire off one more Swagger at least, and if Hydreigon can bypass that check, then Hydreigon's going to be able to fire off a Dracometer. Probably going to start targeting down that Sableye. Does not want to keep having to deal with these confusion checks, as Sableye does get the fire off the Swagger. Going to hit that Hydreigon, so right now more confusion checks for Daniel. And right now the confusion check going to go through for Hydreigon. Is it going to be able to go through? And does fire off the Dracometer, and Zapdos does avoid it, so unfortunate miss right there for Daniel. Just cannot hit Overheats or Dracometers, as the Hydro Pump from Wash Rotom is going to be able to land on the Sableye and pick up the knockout through a critical hit. So right now it's going to be Tyranitar and Zapdos versus Hydreigon and Wash Rotom. So, oh boy, this is close. 2-on-2 right now. Hydreigon confused and really not able to hit through. I mean, if it does pass the confusion check, for some reason it still misses. 2 Overheat misses right now and a Dracometer miss, as the confusion check is able to fire off a Dracometer. Gonna hit the Zapdos. Gonna be a knockout, as we saw last time, and that does pick up the knockout, as Hydreigon drops to -2, but that Tyranitar is very specially bulky. Not going to be able to do too much damage from Hydreigon or Wash Rotom, as Wash Rotom going to be content to fire off a Will-O-Wisp. Going to try to chip away at that Tyranitar. Probably going to do more damage than that Hydro Pump would have at this point. Wash Rotom is still -1 special attack from that Snarl from before, as the Ice Beam going to come out and hit the Hydreigon and bring it down all the way into the red, but the Sandstorm is barely enough, and I think it can actually survive one more turn of Sandstorm, as that burn is probably going to do more damage to Tyranitar than that Draco Meteor right now that Hydreigon would do. So it's a very close match right now. David, of course, if he can land a Rock Slide, that's going to be a victory, as Rotom going to protect itself this turn. Hydreigon needs to get through a Confusion check or snap out of Confusion. It's still confused, doesn't get past the Confusion check, and it does not. It hits itself and knocks it out, so it is going to be Wash Rotom versus Tyranitar, as Tyranitar going to be content with firing off Snarls, so -1 Wash Rotom versus most likely an Assault Vest Tyranitar in the sand that's burned. Tyranitar getting brought back all the way down to about 50% in the yellow right now, as it comes down to how much this Hydro Pump from Wash Rotom can do. If it's a critical hit, then Daniel still has a chance to get through, but if not, most likely this Tyranitar is going to be able to survive and knock it out with a Snarl. So close game right now. It all comes down to whether or not this Hydro Pump hits and gets a crit. So close right now, as Rotom does get to fire off the Hydro Pump. Going to land on the Tyranitar. Is it going to be enough damage? Is there a critical hit? And no, not a critical hit, as Tyranitar fires off a Snarl and seals the deal, as David coming back from an 0-1 deficit to take the victory over Daniel. Kermit, of course, just recently graduated from Senior Division, moving all the way up to Masters. Still top cutting, a very heavily stacked top cut here. So, unfortunate that battle had to end that way. But still, both players played their best, and David is going to move on to the top 4 here at the San Bruno Premier Challenge. We'll be right back.